The Omega invasion. The vanishing stars. The galaxy was dying, and no one knew why. Across the void, entire star systems were disappearing. Not destroyed, not burned out, just gone. Planets, moons, and civilizations erased as if they had never existed. Telescopes aimed at once thriving colonies now found only empty space. At first, scientists thought it was a glitch, a sensor malfunction. But then, reports started flooding in. More stars vanishing, more systems erased. The pattern was clear. Something was coming. The last warning. Deep inside the United Earth Space Command, a team of scientists worked tirelessly to track the anomaly. The energy wave moved at impossible speeds, swallowing everything in its path. Dr. Elena Voss, Earth's top astrophysicist, stared at the latest data on her screen. Her heart pounded. "It's accelerating," she whispered. Admiral Kane, a hardened war veteran, leaned over her shoulder. "How long until it reaches us?" She hesitated. 2 weeks. Maybe less. Kane clenched his fists. "We need answers." He turned to his officers. "Prepare the UES Valor for launch." The UES Valor, Earth's most advanced warship, was tasked with one mission: find out what was happening beyond the edge of known space, and if possible, stop it. The final transmission. The Valor jumped into deep space, heading toward the last known location of a vanished star system. The crew was silent, tense. No one knew what they would find. Commander Eric Sloan, a seasoned officer, stood on the bridge. "Approaching designated coordinates," the pilot announced. Outside the ship's reinforced windows, there was nothing. Not darkness, not debris, just an endless void where an entire system once existed. Sloan felt a chill. "Any readings?" The sensors buzzed. Then, a sudden spike, an energy signature unlike anything seen before. The ship's eye spoke. "Warning. Anomaly detected. Reality fluctuations increasing." Before Sloan could react, the universe itself began to distort. The stars twisted. Space bent. The Valor's lights flickered. Crew members gasped as their own hands blurred in and out of existence. Then, the ship's communications burst to life. A voice crackled through the speakers, hoarse, desperate. "You are the last. Run." A moment later, the UES Valor vanished. Not destroyed, not attacked, just gone. The silence before the storm. On Earth, the transmission was cut off mid-sentence. Dr. Voss's hands trembled as she replayed the final moments. They didn't just disappear. Something took them. Admiral Kane's face darkened. "We are not dealing with an invasion." He exhaled, his voice barely a whisper. "We are dealing with the erasure of existence itself." The command center fell into silence. The enemy had no ships, no soldiers, no weapons, and yet humanity was losing. The invasion had already begun. The Omega Singularity, the world's greatest minds, gathered in the underground laboratories of Geneva, their faces pale with fear. Dr. Elias Carter, the chief scientist of the United Earth Research Division, stared at the data on his screen. His hands trembled. "The wave isn't destroying matter," he whispered. "It's rewriting it." The room fell silent. Every scientist, military official, and intelligence officer present felt the weight of his words. They had believed the colonies wiped out by the cosmic wave were simply erased from existence. But that wasn't the truth. The few survivors who had been rescued from lost settlements had no memory of who they were. They spoke in strange, inhuman tongues, languages that no Earth database could decode. Their DNA had changed, shifting in ways that defied biology. "What does this mean?" General Morgan asked. His voice was sharp, but there was unease in his eyes. Dr. Carter turned to the massive holographic display in the center of the room. A simulation played, showing the wave consuming the human being. It didn't disintegrate them. It rewrote them, cell by cell, molecule by molecule. "It means," Carter said, that these people are no longer human. A war without an enemy. The United Earth government declared a state of emergency. Fleets were mobilized, defense stations activated, and weapons systems prepared for war. But against what? There was no enemy fleet, no monstrous alien race descending upon Earth. The wave was coming, but it had no ships, no soldiers, no weapons. It was something beyond human understanding. How do we fight something that isn't an army? Admiral Kovacs asked. His fleet stood ready at the Mars defense perimeter, but there was nothing to fire at. We don't even know if it can be fought, Carter admitted. But the government didn't wait for answers. Humanity had faced extinction before, from war, from plagues, from disasters. They had always survived. They would survive again, or so they believed. The awakening of the artifact. Thousands of miles away, beneath the frozen wastelands of Antarctica, something ancient stirred. Deep within a classified research facility, alarms blared as the ice cracked. An artifact, buried for untold millennia, had activated. Dr. Lillian Hart, the lead archaeologist on the project, rushed into the observation chamber. The object, a massive black monolith covered in glowing symbols, had begun transmitting a signal. "Where is it sending the transmission?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. A technician frantically worked at his station. "Coordinates, in deep space, far beyond our known galaxy." Dr. Hart felt a chill run down her spine. What's out there? No one had an answer, but they all understood one thing. The artifact was calling something, and whatever it was coming. The final revelation. The President of the United Earth Government stood before the world, broadcasting from the underground command center. Her face was grave. "We are not facing an invasion," she said. "We are facing something far worse, a force older than time itself. We do not know its intentions, but we know it is coming." Across the world, billions watched in silence. The sky above was peaceful, the cities untouched. But something was approaching, something vast. In the deep void of space, beyond human vision, the stars themselves seemed to tremble. The wave was only the beginning. And soon, the true intelligence behind it would arrive. The forgotten war. The U.S. Valor drifted through the cold silence of space, its engines humming softly as it approached the impossible. The coordinates led them to a dead star, collapsed and lifeless, yet it held something that defied all logic, a massive Dyson Sphere, hidden within its lightless heart. Captain Elias Carter stood on the bridge, his eyes fixed on the view screen. The structure was ancient, a titanic shell wrapped around the remains of the star, absorbing what little energy remained. The walls were covered in cracks, signs of a war long forgotten. "This isn't alien," whispered Dr. Mira Solis, the ship's lead scientist. "Look at the architecture. It's human." A heavy silence filled the room. It was impossible. Humanity had only reached the stars a few centuries ago. And yet, as the Valor descended towards the surface of the Dyson Sphere, the ruins became unmistakable. Towers, roads, shattered domes. A civilization had once thrived here. But who were they? And what had happened to them? Lost history. The landing team stepped onto the surface, their boots crunching against dust that had not been disturbed for millennia. The air was thin but breathable. Signs of battle were everywhere. Melted walls, burned-out weapons, skeletons in ancient armor. Lieutenant Voss knelt beside a fallen soldier, brushing away the dust from his armor. "These symbols, they're almost identical to ours." Carter exchanged a look with Mira. "Are you saying this was a human colony?" "More than that," she whispered. "This was a human empire." Shock rippled through the team. There was no record of this in any history books. No ancient legends, no myths. It was as if this civilization had been erased from existence. As they moved deeper into the ruins, they discovered something even stranger. A massive underground chamber, untouched by time. In the center, a single stasis pod stood, its glass covered in frost. Inside lay a woman, her body preserved for what had to be thousands of years. Voss wiped the frost away, revealing her face, strong features, dark hair, and a battle-worn uniform. A name was etched onto the side of the pod. Commander Celine Rain. Carter took a deep breath. Wake her up. The First War. The pod hissed as ancient machinery powered up. Celine's eyes fluttered open, and she gasped, her body shuddering as she returned to life. Her gaze was sharp, scanning her surroundings before locking onto Carter. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice hoarse. Carter stepped forward. "I'm Captain Carter of the U.S. Valor. We found this place. We found you." She closed her eyes for a moment, as if processing a painful memory. "How long?" "By our estimates, at least 20,000 years." A bitter laugh escaped her lips. "Then we failed." Carter frowned. "Failed? Failed what?" She sat up slowly, rubbing her temples. "The war. We fought. We lost. And history was erased." The crew exchanged uneasy glances. Mira stepped forward. "What war?" Celine's eyes darkened. "The war against Omega." "The truth about Omega." Celine stood, her legs still weak, but her mind sharp. "You think Omega is an empire, don't you? A civilization, maybe even an enemy you can fight." She shook her head. "It's worse than that. Omega is a process." "A process," Voss repeated. Celine nodded. "Every advanced species is rewritten, assimilated. It doesn't conquer, it transforms. You reach a certain point, and it comes for you. It happened to my people. We fought, but we couldn't stop it." Carter clenched his jaw. "Then how are we still here? If Omega always wins, why hasn't it taken us yet?" Celine hesitated. "That's the question, isn't it?" Something interfered. Something stopped Omega from finishing the job. The air in the chamber grew heavy. If Omega was unstoppable, yet humanity had survived. What had saved them? And more importantly, where was it now? A warning beep on Carter's wrist communicator broke the silence. The Valor's AI spoke urgently. "Captain, we have incoming. Multiple unknown signatures approaching the system." Celine's expression hardened. "They found you." Carter turned to his crew. "Get back to the ship. Now." As the team ran, Celine whispered under her breath, "The war isn't forgotten. It's just beginning again." The last defense breaks. The skies above Earth twisted into unnatural shades. The stars flickered, shifting between colors that had no name. Space itself seemed to ripple like a disturbed pond. And then they arrived. Not in ships, not in anything that could be understood. The Omega forces did not invade in the way humanity had prepared for. No great fleets darkened the sky. No alien armies landed with weapons drawn. Instead, the universe itself betrayed its defenders. On the ground, General Marcus Steele stood at the command center, his fingers clenched into fists. The massive defense cannons positioned across the city locked onto the shifting disturbances in the sky. Fighter jets roared across the heavens, leaving vapor trails in a desperate attempt to intercept whatever was coming. "Fire everything," Steele ordered. The missiles launched, streaking toward the anomalies. The plasma rounds fired from railguns. Explosions bloomed in the sky, only for the impossible to happen. The missiles did not explode. They twisted, spiraling backward in time, returning to their launch tubes as if they had never left. Plasma bolts stretched into infinity, frozen midair like paintings on a canvas. Even bullets fired from rifles simply stopped, hovering uselessly in space. "What the hell?" one soldier muttered, stepping back in horror. The ground trembled, and then, as if the world itself had taken a breath, reality broke. Buildings twisted, their structures warping into impossible angles. Streets folded inward like paper. Time slowed, then sped up, then stopped entirely. Some soldiers found themselves caught in loops, repeating the same motion over and over again. blinking, turning, blinking, turning. Others simply vanished, erased from existence without a sound. And then came the voice. It's not an enemy. It's a virus. The words echoed through the battlefield, spoken by a figure standing alone amidst the chaos. He was old, his armor battered, his eyes weary. A warrior from the First War, one of the few who had faced Omega before and survived. General Steele turned to him. What do you mean, a virus? The warrior's voice was grim. Omega doesn't invade. It infects. It rewrites reality itself. And you're already infected. Before Steele could respond, the screaming started. Soldiers dropped their weapons, clutching their heads. Some fell to their knees, their eyes wide with terror. Others began muttering in strange, alien tongues. One man stood completely still, his body shaking as something unseen worked beneath his skin. His veins pulsed, darkening into an unnatural black color. Corporal Davis, a nearby soldier called, stepping toward him. Davis turned his head, but it wasn't him anymore. His eyes were empty. His mouth curled into a grin that didn't belong to a human, and when he spoke, his voice was wrong. Layered, filled with whispers of countless voices. You don't understand. The thing that had been Davis said. You are already part of it. Steele stumbled back, horror filling his chest. More soldiers were changing. Some collapsed as if their minds had been erased. Others twisted into shapes that should not exist. Their bodies stretched, their bones shifting, as if something inside them was rewriting their very essence. The warrior from the First War took a deep breath. This is how it ends, not with a battle, not with a last stand, but with everything we are being rewritten. Steele refused to accept it. He grabbed his rifle, aimed at the thing that had been Davis, and pulled the trigger. The bullet never reached its target. It simply stopped in midair. Davis. No, the thing that had replaced him, tilted its head. You don't fight the air you breathe. You don't fight the gravity that holds you down. You don't fight Omega. Steele turned toward the warrior. There has to be a way. The warrior's face was grim. We tried before. We failed. It doesn't conquer with war. It doesn't need to. Steele felt something shift inside him, a whisper at the edge of his mind, a creeping sensation, as if something unseen had already found its way inside. He looked at his hands. They were shaking. His fingers flickered, just for a moment, as if they were out of sync with reality itself. The infection had begun, and there was no cure. The mind war. The ruins of Earth were silent. Cities had fallen, skies darkened, and what was left of humanity lived in fear. But the war was not over. It had never been about weapons or soldiers. It was a battle of the mind. Dr. Elias Carter stood in an underground lab, staring at a screen filled with strange symbols. He had seen war. He had seen destruction. But this was something beyond human understanding. The enemy, known as Omega, was not an army. It was an idea, a thought that spread like a virus, infecting minds and turning people into empty shells. Elias had watched it happen. Soldiers who had fought bravely one day would suddenly stop, their eyes blank, their thoughts consumed by Omega. They became puppets, their bodies still alive, but their wills completely lost. It was a war no weapon could fight. We have to find a way, Elias said, his voice trembling. Beside him, Dr. Lena Patel adjusted her glasses and pointed at the screen. There is something in our DNA, something old, something hidden. If we unlock it, we might have a chance. Elias frowned. What do you mean? Lena took a deep breath. A long time ago, Earth faced another disaster. Someone intervened. Our ancestors left traces of it in their genes, a forgotten trait buried deep within us. Are you saying humanity has a defense mechanism? Elias asked. Lena nodded. Yes, and if we can awaken it, we might be able to resist Omega. The first test. The lab was silent as the test began. The few survivors who had not yet fallen to Omega gathered around. They were desperate, afraid, and running out of time. If this experiment failed, there would be no one left. A young soldier named Ryan was the first volunteer. He had lost his entire family, but his mind remained strong. He sat in the chair as Lena placed electrodes on his head. "You might feel strange," she warned, "but if this works, you'll become something new." Ryan clenched his fists. "Do it." Lena activated the machine. A pulse of energy surged through Ryan's body. He gasped, his eyes widening. His mind opened. Memories, instincts, knowledge that wasn't his own flooded in. He saw flashes of ancient battles, of beings that were not human but had fought to protect this world. And then he understood. "I can feel it," he whispered. "The power, the resistance. It was always inside us." The awakening. Elias and Lena watched in awe. Ryan stood up, his posture different, stronger, more aware. Then the alarms blared. "They're here," a voice shouted. "Omega's forces are coming." Ryan turned toward the entrance. The infected humans, empty, hollow versions of what they once were, marched forward. They had no weapons. They didn't need them. Omega controlled them completely. Ryan took a deep breath. And then something changed. A wave of energy rippled from his body. It was invisible, but powerful. The infected soldiers froze. Their eyes flickered. Confusion crossed their faces. "It's working." Lena gasped. Ryan stepped forward. "Omega takes control of minds. But now, I can push back." He focused. One by one, the infected soldiers fell to their knees. They clutched their heads, their minds battling the force that had enslaved them. And then one of them spoke. "Who am I?" It was working. Omega was being driven out. The final battle. News of Ryan's transformation spread quickly. More volunteers stepped forward. One by one, they awakened the hidden trait within them. The tide of the war began to turn. Elias knew what had to be done. "We're not fighting Omega," he said. "We're becoming something greater." The survivors marched forward, not with weapons, but with their minds. They pushed back against the infection. Every time Omega tried to take control, they resisted. And as more humans awakened, Omega weakened. In the heart of the battlefield, Ryan stood before the final wave of infected. He reached out, his thoughts crashing into the force that had tried to consume Earth. "Enough," he said. And for the first time, Omega hesitated. Humanity had changed. The war was over. But a new era had just begun. Ascension Protocol. The sky burned with unnatural colors. Lightning without clouds tore through the battlefield, splitting ships in half. Soldiers screamed as their bodies flickered between existence and nothingness. The war had reached its final stage. Humanity's last survivors stood on the edge of something terrifying. Transformation. Captain Elias Cade stood among them, his body shaking from the unbearable energy coursing through his veins. He looked at his hands, which were no longer just flesh and bone. They shimmered like a mirage, bending light and reality itself. He wasn't the only one. The other survivors, men and women who had fought for years against Omega, were changing. "Captain," whispered Lieutenant Miravos, her voice filled with awe and fear. "What's happening to us?" Elias turned to her, his eyes now glowing with a faint golden light. "We're becoming something else," he said. "Something more." The Ascension Protocol had been activated, the final phase of their desperate plan to stop Omega. The war had pushed humanity to the brink. And now, evolution was their only path forward. The first post-humans. Omega had rewritten reality countless times. It had destroyed planets, erased timelines, and bent the universe to its will. But now, humanity was learning to do the same. One of the soldiers, a young man named Dax, lifted his hands toward the sky. The air around him rippled, and suddenly he was gone. A second later, he reappeared behind Elias, gasping. I teleported," he stammered. Others were discovering their abilities as well. Mira stretched out her arm, and her fingers extended like liquid, reshaping into a blade. Another soldier lifted a fallen comrade from the ground, his wounds closing as if time itself had reversed. "We're like Omega now," Mira said, her voice trembling. "No," Elias corrected. "We're something different. We're still us." But were they? The final battle. Above them, Omega's forces gathered, the sky filled with its massive constructs. Living machines made of pure energy and fought. Omega itself hovered at the center, a vast, shifting presence that had no true form. Elias felt its mind press against his. "You have changed, but you are still beneath me." He gritted his teeth. "Let's see about that." With a single thought, he launched himself into the sky. The other survivors followed, no longer bound by gravity. The battle erupted in an explosion of colors and sound. Ships clashed. But now the rules had changed. Humans no longer needed weapons. They moved faster than bullets, dodged beams of light, and struck with the force of collapsing stars. Omega's machines tried to adapt, but for the first time, the enemy was struggling. Mira tore through an enemy ship with her bare hands, bending metal like clay. Dax blinked in and out of existence, appearing inside an enemy craft and ripping its core apart. Others reshaped the battlefield itself, warping reality to create barriers, weapons, and even entire new strategies in seconds. Omega roared, its voice vibrating through space itself. "You are losing yourselves. You are no longer human." Elias hesitated. Was Omega right? They were changing, evolving beyond anything recognizable. If they won, would they still be human? The choice. For a moment, Elias let the thought consume him. He looked at his reflection in a broken piece of metal floating nearby. His face was still there, but his eyes held the power of stars. He wasn't the man he had been before. Was survival worth losing their humanity? Then he saw Earth below, their home, the last hope of their species. If they lost this battle, nothing else would matter. He clenched his fists. We decide what humanity means, not Omega. With a final push, he and the others attacked together. They poured every ounce of their newfound power into Omega's core, bending reality itself to their will. The great enemy shrieked as its form unraveled. The universe around them twisted, then snapped back into place. Omega was gone. The new dawn. The survivors landed back on Earth, the battlefield now silent. The war was over, but they were no longer the same people who had started it. Elias looked at his team, his family. They were something new, something beyond human. Mira stepped beside him. "So, what now?" Elias exhaled. "Now, we build. Whatever we've become, we decide what it means." As the first rays of dawn broke across the ruined landscape, the last survivors of humanity took their first steps into a new future. They were no longer just human. They were something more, and they would decide what that meant. The Omega Paradox. The void cracked open as the post-humans tore through the last of Omega's defenses. Energy storms swirled around them, bending space itself as they pushed deeper into the heart of the cosmic entity. They had come too far to turn back. The war had cost them everything. Planets reduced to ash, entire species wiped from existence, and now the final confrontation was upon them. Leading the charge was Commander Elias Voss, his biomechanical body humming with raw power. His mind was linked to his team through neural implants, allowing them to move as one. The closer they got to Omega's core, the more reality twisted around them. Time slowed, sped up, and sometimes stopped altogether. But they pressed on. Voss gritted his teeth as another wave of Omega's drones emerged from the swirling abyss. Unlike any machine or life form they had encountered before, these entities shifted between dimensions, flickering like mirages. The post-humans fought back with all they had: plasma bursts, quantum disruptors, and weapons forged from black hole fragments. But Omega was relentless, its defenses endless. "Keep moving," Voss commanded. A pulse of energy erupted ahead, and suddenly, they were somewhere else. A city of towering structures, glowing with ancient symbols, stretched before them. It was not an illusion. It was real. "Where are we?" whispered Sora, the team's cybernetic strategist. Voss scanned the area, his augmented eyes processing data at impossible speeds. The structures weren't just buildings. They were records, memories, echoes of civilizations that once existed. Then, the truth revealed itself. Omega wasn't an invader. It wasn't a conqueror. It was something far worse. A failsafe. A towering figure materialized before them. A projection of Omega's true form. Its voice echoed through their minds, neither mechanical nor organic. "You should not be here." Voss stepped forward, weapons at the ready. "We're ending this. No more worlds will fall to you." Omega's voice was calm. "You misunderstand." The air shimmered, and suddenly they saw the past. Empires rising, reaching their peak, expanding beyond control, until Omega arrived. It had erased them, rewritten them, ensuring they never became a threat to the balance of the universe. "Every civilization eventually becomes too powerful," Omega explained. "They disrupt the natural order. They become the destroyers of all things." Voss clenched his fists. "So you kill them. I reset them." A terrifying realization dawned upon the post-humans. Every lost civilization, every empire that had mysteriously vanished, it had been Omega, a cosmic mechanism designed to ensure no species ever reached ultimate dominance. And now, it was humanity's turn. Sora gasped. "If we stop you, the universe might spiral into chaos." "If we don't," Voss growled, "humanity will be erased." Omega's form flickered. The choice was made long ago. The walls of reality began to shift again. The failsafe was activating. Humanity was about to be rewritten. Voss made his decision. Fire. The post-humans unleashed everything they had. Beams of antimatter, bursts of tachyon energy, weapons powerful enough to shatter stars. Omega resisted, its form twisting, adapting, rewriting itself to counter their attacks. But the post-humans had evolved beyond anything Omega had encountered before. They weren't just soldiers. They were the future. Voss charged, a blade of pure quantum energy in his hands. He drove it into Omega's core, pushing through layers of shifting matter and raw information. Omega screamed, not in pain, but in realization. "You are different." Voss pushed deeper, his very existence unraveling in the process. His team followed, sacrificing themselves to shatter the paradox. Then, silence. Omega collapsed. The failsafe was broken. And for the first time in history, a civilization had defied the cycle. Humanity had won. But at what cost?